Today's tutorial is going to look at the empirical formula, which you may remember from your notes and your book that it's the simplest whole number ratio of a formula. Now I'm just going to do some sample problems. Calculate the empirical formula of 79.8% carbon and 20.2% hydrogen. Now you are going to need a calculator for this tutorial. So our first step is the easy step. We're going to take our percents that we're given and we're going to change them to grams. Now the reason we can do this is that we can think of this as being a 100-gram sample, and that 79.8 grams of carbon and 20.2 grams make up that 100 grams. So I'm going to do it as two separate conversions on the side. 79.8 grams of carbon here over 1, just to line up my future conversion factors. And I'm going to have 20.2 grams of hydrogen here over 1. Now I'm setting up these conversion factors so I can do my grams to mole conversion. Now a grams to mole conversion is going to represent molar mass. Now I'm going to calculate the molar mass from my PT, also known as my periodic table. Now when I set it up as a conversion factor, I'm going to look at the front, I'm going to see grams. So I want grams to be on the bottom here. So grams of C from the periodic table is 12.01, and it's always per 1 mole of carbon. Notice how our grams of C cancel out, and I'm left with moles with which I wanted to end with. Now I have grams of H here, so I need grams of H here per 1 mole of H on the top, and we'll see grams of H, and when we look at the periodic table, we'll see 1.01. Now that I have moles of each of them, I'm going to plug it into my calculator, so I'm going to do, in my calculator, 79.8 divided by 12.01, and I'm going to get 6.64. Now I'm going to go out to 3 sig figs because that's what my given has for both of them. Okay, let's do the next one. 20.2 divided by 1.01, and I get 19.8. Now, our last step says divide by the lowest. What that means is that we're going to want to divide by the lowest amount of moles. So we have 6.64 and 19.8. So let's divide 6.64 by itself because it is the lowest. It will have a ratio of 1. And let's do 19.8 divided by 6.64. So 19.8 divided by 6.64, we're going to get 2.98. Now 2.98 to one significant figure rounds up to 3. So what we'll have is now our subscripts. Now that we have our subscripts, we're going to have 1 C and 3 H's, also known as CH3. Okay, now what happens if it is not rounded to a whole number? Let's say if we have a half, like something like 1.5. To get out of the half, we're going to multiply by 2. And let's say we have something like 1.3333 repeating, we're going to multiply it by 3. Now those are the two most common mistakes that I see, is that you're going to want to round up halves and thirds. So let's try another example. This one's going to be a little bit tougher, but the same process for each one. Okay, so remember, empirical formula represents the simplest whole number ratio. So that's what we're looking at for this. Now, it says, what is the empirical formula of 25.9% of nitrogen and 74.1% of oxygen? Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to change percent to grams. So we're going to have 25.9 grams of N over 1, and we're going to have 74.1 grams of O over 1. Now I still set up the same conversion I did last time, and we're going to go from grams to mole, meaning molar mass, from PT. Now I know these from memory. You can reference your periodic table. So grams of nitrogen on the bottom, grams of oxygen on the bottom. 1 mole of nitrogen on the top, 1 mole of oxygen on the bottom. 14.01 here, and 16.00 for our oxygen. Notice how our grams of nitrogen, grams of nitrogen, grams of oxygen cancels out. And we're just left with our mole amounts. So let's do 25.9 divided by 14.01. We're going to get 1.85 moles. And let's do 74.1 divided by 16. And we're going to get 4.63 moles. Now our last step is to divide by the lowest. So I have 1.85 and 4.63, so we're going to divide by 1.85 and get 1 here and 1.85, so let's do 4.63 divided by 1.85, and you'll see we have 2.50. Now we have a half, so remember when we have a half or a third, half we multiply by 2, thirds we multiply by 3. So if I multiply this by 2, I have to do the same up here. So what you do to one, you have to do to the other. So I'm not just going to have one n, I'm going to have n2. 2 times 2.5 is 5, and the correct empirical formula would be N2O5. Now we couldn't leave it as 2.5 because remember empirical formulas are the simplest whole number ratio. Thanks for watching.